The arrival of the impossible. The stars above Earth shimmered like tiny diamonds, peaceful and quiet. But that peace was about to be shattered forever. A massive fleet of Selfar warships appeared at the edge of the solar system, moving silently through space like dark shadows. The Selfar Dominion was one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of planets, destroyed entire civilizations, and never faced defeat. To them, Earth was just another weak planet, another easy victory. Inside the command ship, Supreme Overlord Vorkath sat on his golden throne, watching the planet below. His red eyes burned with arrogance. "Humans will surrender quickly," he said, his voice cold and sharp, like all the others before them. A Selfar general stepped forward and bowed. "Shall we give them the usual warning, my lord?" Vorkath nodded. "Yes, give them a chance to bow before us. But if they resist, destroy them." A powerful message was sent to Earth. It echoed across every screen, every radio, every communication device. "This is Supreme Overlord Vorkath of the Selfar Dominion. Your planet now belongs to us. Surrender immediately, or be wiped from existence." The world froze. People watched in horror as images of the massive Selfar war fleet appeared in the sky. Their ships were the size of cities, covered in dark metal, glowing with blue energy. Even Earth's best weapons looked useless against them. In a secret underground bunker, Earth's leaders gathered. The President of the United Nations, a tall man with gray hair, slammed his fist on the table. "They're too powerful. We cannot win this war." A military general shook his head. "Our best weapons are nothing compared to theirs. If we fight, humanity will be destroyed." A deep silence filled the room. The leaders of Earth looked at each other, fear in their eyes. Surrender seemed like the only option. But then, a voice spoke from the shadows. "No." Everyone turned. A man stepped forward, his face hidden in the dim light. His uniform had no name, no rank. But the way he stood, strong, fearless, made everyone stop and listen. The president frowned. "Who are you?" The man stepped into the light. His face was hard, his eyes sharp like a predator. "My name does not matter. What matters is this: surrender is not an option." The president sighed. "You don't understand. If we fight, we die." The man smiled. It was not a normal smile. It was a smile of confidence, of something dangerous. "No," he said again. "If we fight, they die." The room fell silent. The president leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Their technology is superior. Their weapons can turn cities to dust. How do we win against that?" The man placed a small device on the table. A hologram appeared, showing battles from Earth's history, from ancient wars to modern conflicts. "We have fought wars for thousands of years," he said. "We have fought against impossible odds. We have faced enemies stronger, faster, smarter, and we won. Not because we were the strongest, but because we were the most dangerous." The leaders watched as the hologram showed human soldiers fighting against overwhelming numbers, using tactics that no other species could understand. Ambushes, traps, guerrilla warfare, psychological warfare. "Every species in the galaxy fights with logic," the man continued. "They follow rules. They fight in ways that make sense." He turned off the hologram and looked at the president. "We don't. We fight dirty. We fight like demons. And we don't stop." The president hesitated. "And if we lose?" The man's smile grew wider. "We won't." At that moment, alarms blared across the bunker. The Selfar had arrived in Earth's orbit. Their ships hovered like black clouds, ready to strike. Supreme Overlord Vorkath watched from his throne and smirked. "Foolish humans. They will kneel." But deep below, in hidden bunkers, in underground tunnels, on military bases across the world, humanity prepared for war. They did not beg. They did not bow. Because humans were not prey. They were hunters. and the HFY were about to learn the truth. Humanity was the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The battle begins, and it's a massacre. The first attack came at dawn. The HFY warships hovered over Earth's skies, casting massive shadows over cities and oceans. Their engines hummed with a low, eerie sound, like a beast breathing before the kill. Across the world, people held their breath, waiting for the inevitable. Supreme Overlord Vorkath sat on his command throne, his red eyes glowing with confidence. Victory was certain. Humanity had not surrendered, but that was expected. Most lesser species refused at first. It made no difference. Vorkath raised a single clawed hand. Let it begin. From the fleet above, hundreds of dropships descended like falling meteors, blazing through the sky. The HFY invasion force, millions of elite warriors, armed with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, was about to strike. And yet, something felt wrong. Vorkath watched the Earth's surface closely. He had studied war for centuries. He had led countless invasions. By now, he should have seen panic, civilians running, military forces scrambling to mount a defense, leaders making desperate transmissions begging for peace. But Earth was silent. There was no mass evacuation, no desperate calls for surrender. Where were the humans? The first dropships landed outside New York City. Towering alien warriors stormed out, weapons raised. They moved in formation, expecting to meet resistance, but the streets were empty. No soldiers, no police, not a single human. A HFY commander barked orders. Advance, sweep the city. The aliens spread out, their glowing weapons scanning every shadow. Their sensors detected life, but no clear enemy presence. Then, in the eerie silence, something whistled through the air. Boom! A massive explosion tore through the front lines. Buildings collapsed, flames erupted. HFY warriors screamed as shrapnel ripped through their armor. Before the surviving soldiers could react, gunfire erupted from the rooftops. The humans had been waiting. From hidden positions, snipers picked off the invaders with terrifying precision. Explosive traps set in the streets turned every step into a potential death sentence. HFY warriors tried to advance, but found themselves cut down in seconds. It wasn't war. It was slaughter. The HFY commander shouted into his communicator, "We are under heavy fire. We need reinforcements." A bullet pierced his skull before he could finish. Across the planet, the same pattern repeated. HFY forces landed in major cities: London, Tokyo, Moscow, Sydney, Cairo, expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they were met with a nightmare. In the jungles of South America, alien squads vanished into the shadows, their last moments filled with whispers and silent, unseen killers. In the mountains of Afghanistan, HFY war machines rolled forward, only to be crushed by controlled avalanches and hidden explosives. In the frozen tundras of Russia, the invaders found themselves outmaneuvered by human snipers who could kill from miles away without being seen. In the deserts of Africa, human ambush teams used heat and deception to trick the HFY into deadly traps. Everywhere, humanity fought with ruthless efficiency. The HFY had faced many enemies before. They had fought species with powerful weapons, with massive fleets, with towering war machines. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Humanity did not fight for territory. Humanity did not fight for glory. Humanity fought for survival, and that made them more dangerous than anything the HFY had ever encountered. Vorkath's realization. From his warship, Supreme Overlord Vorkath watched in horror. His fleet was undamaged, his technology superior, his warriors elite. And yet, his invasion force was being annihilated. His generals stood behind him, whispering nervously. This was not normal. No species had ever fought like this. One general hesitated before speaking. "My lord, they are not fighting like a normal military force." Vorkath clenched his fists. Then what are they fighting like? The general swallowed hard. Like monsters, the psychological war begins. Across the planet, Zelfar soldiers began breaking down. They had expected a simple war, but what they found was something far worse. They saw human soldiers laughing in the face of death, charging into battle even when outnumbered. They saw civilians fighting alongside the military, old men, young women, even children, all armed and willing to die rather than surrender. They saw the way humans adapted, changing tactics in seconds, outthinking even the most advanced battle strategies. And then came the messages. Human forces hacked into the Zelfar communication channels. Every soldier's helmet, every ship's speakers, every war machine suddenly played the same message. You should have left us alone. Then silence. The aliens panicked. Soldiers refused to leave their dropships. Officers reported mass desertions. Some warriors even committed suicide rather than face the humans. Vorkath saw it happening. His warriors were not just losing the battle, they were losing their minds. He turned to his generals. Send reinforcements. A deep, terrible silence filled the command center. The generals looked at each other, then back at their leader. My lord, we have no reinforcements left. Vorkath's red eyes burned with rage. How was this possible? They had fought weaker species before. They had crushed entire civilizations. Why were humans different? A single thought crept into his mind. The thought he had never considered before. What if we cannot win? The fear spreads. Zelfar's darkest nightmare. The Zelfar Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries. They had crushed countless civilizations, reducing entire planets to ash. No species had ever fought back successfully. No species had ever made them afraid. Until now. Now, across the battlefields of Earth, something unnatural was happening. The Zelfar weren't just losing. They were breaking. And for the first time in history, the galaxy's most feared conquerors were experiencing something they had never felt before. The first signs of fear. Deep in the jungles of South America, a Zelfar warrior ran. His once proud armor was scratched and covered in blood. Some of it his own, some of it from his fallen comrades. His breathing was ragged, his heart's pounding in his chest. He was a veteran of 100 wars. He had conquered planets, burned cities, and executed leaders. But now he was running for his life. He could hear them behind him. Silent shadows moving through the trees, always just out of sight. The humans were hunting him. His helmet's sensors detected motion, but he saw nothing. Then, without warning, a whisper crackled through his communicator. Where are you running to? His blood turned to ice. It was a human voice. He turned wildly, aiming his plasma rifle in every direction. He fired into the trees, into the darkness, into the shadows that weren't there. Nothing. A rustling sound came from above. He looked up. A pair of human eyes stared back at him from the treetops. A second later, a knife plunged into his throat. Before he could even scream, the human whispered again. You should have stayed in space. Darkness consumed him. Mass deserters and broken minds. Similar nightmares were unfolding across Earth. In the deserts of Africa, Zelfar squads disappeared without a trace, their weapons left behind, their bodies never found. In the war-torn cities of Europe, alien officers were dragged from their command posts in the middle of the night, vanishing without a sound. In the mountains of Asia, Zelfar soldiers refused to leave their bunkers. Some even sealed the doors from the inside, choosing to starve rather than face the humans outside. On board the Zelfar flagship, Supreme Overlord Vorkath watched the reports in silence. He was no fool. He had seen countless wars. He had fought against creatures of all kinds. But never had he seen an army collapse like this. The war was barely days old, and already his elite forces were deserting in record numbers. Something was wrong. A Zelfar admiral approached him carefully. His hands trembled slightly. An unacceptable display of weakness. My lord, the soldiers. He hesitated. They're refusing to fight. Vorkath turned slowly. refusing. The admiral swallowed hard. Many are, choosing to take their own lives rather than go back into battle. Vorkath's claws dug into the metal armrest of his throne. Suicide. Among Selfar warriors? Impossible. The admiral continued. They are saying the humans are not normal. They fight like demons. Vorkath's eyes narrowed. Demons? The admiral nodded. They use unnatural tactics, ambushes, psychological attacks. They kill without mercy, and they do not fear death. Vorkath studied the battlefield footage playing on the large screens before him. He saw his warriors ambushed and slaughtered in dark alleys, jungles, and mountains. He saw humans laughing as they fought, even when outnumbered. He saw humans charging forward despite injuries that would have killed any other species. And then he saw something that truly disturbed him. A Zelfar squad had been captured, not executed, not tortured, captured. The humans had sent them back, alive. But when the survivors returned to their command posts, they refused to speak. They simply sat in silence, eyes blank, bodies shaking. One soldier had torn out his own eyes to avoid seeing whatever had broken his mind. Another had been found rocking back and forth, whispering the same words over and over again. They are not like us. They are not like us. The galaxy watches in horror. The Zelfar Dominion was one of the greatest powers in the galaxy. Their invasion of Earth had been expected to be a formality, a simple show of force. Other alien empires had watched with mild interest, waiting to see how long humanity would last before begging for mercy. Now those same empires were terrified. Live footage of the war spread across the stars. Broadcasts showed Selfar warriors breaking ranks, screaming as they were cut down in the shadows. A famous news anchor from the Varkari Republic spoke in a trembling voice. We believe that Selfar to be the strongest warriors in the galaxy. But now, we see them running, falling, dying. A senator from the Zelnak Confederacy watched a clip of human soldiers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. He turned to his advisors. We must never fight these creatures. Even the Varkari High Council, known for their cold, emotionless logic, issued a warning to all species. Do not provoke the humans. Across the galaxy, fleets were quietly repositioned, diplomatic envoys dispatched, and war plans silently erased from databases. The galaxy had laughed when humans first claimed they would resist. Now, no one was laughing. Vorkath's final attempt. Inside the command center of the Selfar flagship, Vorkath made his decision. He had underestimated humanity. That was his mistake. But he would not lose this war. He turned to his second-in-command. Prepare the Doomsday Protocol. The room fell silent. The admiral's eyes widened. My lord, that would mean the destruction of an entire solar system. Even if we win, the cost. Vorkath's voice was ice-cold. We have no other option. The admiral hesitated. And if this fails? Vorkath's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. Then we are already dead. The truth about humanity is revealed. A deep silence filled the war room of the Selfar flagship. The Supreme Overlord Vorkath stood before a massive holographic projection of Earth, his red eyes burning with something he had never felt before. Uncertainty. His invasion, what should have been an effortless conquest, had turned into a nightmare. His warriors, once feared across the galaxy, were retreating in terror. Some refused to fight. Some deserted. Some took their own lives. And worst of all, the humans weren't even at full strength. Vorkath's claws tightened into a fist. This cannot be. For the first time in his long rule, he was considering something that had never crossed his mind before. What if humanity was something different? The Doomsday Protocol. A Zelfar admiral hesitated before stepping forward. His voice was tight with fear. My lord, the Doomsday Protocol is prepared. Vorkath nodded. Deploy it. Across the Zelfar fleet, massive warships reconfigured their weapon systems. The Doomsday Protocol was not a normal weapon. It was a last resort, a method of wiping out an entire solar system. If the HFY could not conquer Earth, they would erase it. On the flagship's command deck, engineers worked frantically, loading coordinates and preparing the final sequence. A countdown began. 10 minutes until planetary detonation. A quiet sense of relief washed over the HFY officers. It was cruel, but at least they wouldn't have to fight the humans anymore. Then something strange happened. One by one, the warships lost control of their targeting systems. The countdown froze. The screens flickered. Power across the fleet dropped by 60%. Panic spread. "Sir, the system is failing," an officer shouted. Vorkath turned sharply. "Impossible. There's no force in the galaxy that can counteract this technology." "My lord," the officer swallowed. "It's not a force. It's a hack." Vorkath's eyes widened. A hack. The officer's fingers flew over the control panel, trying to regain access. His voice was almost a whisper. "Someone is inside our system." Vorkath's blood ran cold. That was impossible. No species had the technology to break through Selfar military firewalls. But then, the ship's communication systems flashed on their own. A single message appeared on every screen, in perfect Selthari script. "Nice try. But if you want to destroy our planet, you'll have to do it the hard way." The XLFAR officers stared in horror. This wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Somewhere, out there, a human had done this. Vorkath's breathing was heavy as he whispered, "Find them." The officer shook his head. "We can't. They're already gone." Vorkath turned to his generals, his voice cold and sharp. "Then we send everything we have. If they want war, we will give them hell. Total planetary invasion begins now. The final attack, and the ultimate trap." Thousands of Selfar warships descended toward Earth in a final desperate push. There was no more strategy, no more negotiation. This was about survival. They landed in massive numbers, flooding battlefields across the planet. But as the first waves touched the ground, they realized something was wrong. Earth's cities were empty. There were no defenses, no military formations. It was as if humanity had vanished. One commander barked orders through his communicator. "Advance. Find them." But then, the ground shook. Before the XLFAR could react, entire city blocks collapsed, revealing underground tunnels beneath the streets. Then came the explosions. Hundreds, no, thousands of traps activated all at once. Zelfar forces were buried alive, vaporized, electrocuted, or simply vanished into the shadows. They had walked straight into a planetary death trap. Across the war-torn cities, human forces emerged from the darkness. Their weapons were crude compared to the XLFARs, but they fought with a brutality that no species had ever seen before. They moved too fast. They adapted too quickly. They were too savage. One Selfar officer's voice cracked through the communication channels. "We can't beat them. They are not soldiers. They are monsters." Another screamed in panic. "We have made a mistake. We should have never come here." For the first time in history, an invasion force was being hunted down by the species they had intended to conquer. The truth was now undeniable. The XLFAR were not fighting a war. They were fighting against extinction. The truth about humanity. Back on the XLFAR flagship, Vorkath's mind raced. How? How was this happening? Humans were supposed to be weak. Their technology was supposed to be primitive. But now his warriors, the best in the galaxy, were falling apart. And then, it all made sense. Humanity wasn't the strongest species. Humanity wasn't the smartest species. Humanity wasn't the most advanced species. But none of that mattered. Because humans were the most dangerous species. Their strength wasn't in their weapons. It was in their adaptability, their unpredictability, their sheer refusal to lose. Vorkath took a slow breath. His entire worldview had been shattered. The war was over. Not because his fleet was defeated, not because Earth's armies had won, but because the HFY no longer wanted to fight. A terrified voice broke through the silent war room. It was one of his commanders on the battlefield, his voice shaking. "Supreme Overlord, please, we must retreat." Vorkath closed his eyes. The HFY Dominion had never known fear. But now, fear was all they had left. The fall of the HFY Empire. The HFY Dominion had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. They had burned civilizations, enslaved species, and shattered worlds. No enemy had ever forced them to surrender. No enemy had ever made them run. Until now. Until humanity. Now their once mighty fleets were falling apart. Their warriors were deserting. Their leaders were paralyzed with fear. And across the galaxy, a terrifying truth spread like wildfire. The war against humanity was already lost. The last order, retreat. Inside the flagship Wrath of Dominion, Supreme Overlord Vorkath stood alone in his command chamber. The massive screens before him displayed horror. His elite warriors refused to fight. Some had turned their weapons on themselves. His warships, once symbols of HFY power, were abandoning the battlefield, even before receiving orders. Human forces had hacked into their communication networks, broadcasting chilling messages across the fleet. One message played repeatedly, over and over, in HFY dialect. "There is nowhere left to run." Vorkath's claws dug into his throne. This was not how it was supposed to be. The HFY were conquerors. They were invincible. And yet, the humans had shattered them. His most loyal general, Kavak, stood before him, his posture tense. "My lord," Kavak said, his voice hoarse, "we must leave." Vorkath slowly turned to face him. "We do not retreat." Kavak hesitated, then spoke again, his words trembling with something no HFY had ever spoken before. "Then we will all die." For a long moment, Vorkath did not move. The unthinkable had happened. The unstoppable had been stopped. He closed his eyes. The HFY Dominion was not just losing a war. It was dying. And so, with a voice heavy with the weight of history, Vorkath finally spoke the words no HFY leader had ever spoken before. "All forces, retreat." The humiliation of the HFY. The retreat order shook the galaxy. It was impossible. The HFY had never run from battle. They had never surrendered a war. But now, their entire armada was turning tail and fleeing back into deep space. The human forces did not chase them. They didn't need to, because the damage was already done. The HFY's reputation was in ruins. Their empire had built itself on fear, on dominance, on power. But humanity had done something that no species had ever dared to do. They had made the HFY afraid. And in doing so, they had destroyed them. The shocking reaction of the galaxy. The moment the war ended, every major power in the galaxy took notice. The Varkari Republic, who had once mocked humanity, now held emergency meetings to establish new diplomatic ties. The Zelnak Confederacy, who had previously viewed Earth as insignificant, now whispered among themselves in fear. The Kroger Imperium, one of the HFY's greatest rivals, sent a simple, chilling message to the human leaders. "We will never fight you." For the first time in history, a species had risen to power, not through diplomacy, not through technological superiority, but through sheer terror. The galaxy had changed forever. The HFY's final betrayal. But the war was not over. As the HFY retreated into the dark corners of the galaxy, Vorkath made a decision. If the HFY Dominion was to fall, it would not fall alone. From deep within their empire, he activated a secret signal. Across dozens of occupied worlds, HFY warlords activated their doomsday weapons. They would burn their own planets. They would erase entire civilizations. If they could not rule, then no one would. This was their final act of defiance. But as the doomsday systems began activating, something unexpected happened. A human transmission cut through every HFY network. A single face appeared on the screens. A human general. His face was calm, his eyes sharp as steel. And he smiled. "We knew you would try this." Vorkath's eyes widened. "What?" The human general leaned forward. "You think we didn't anticipate this? We've been at war with our own kind for thousands of years. You're not the first tyrant to try this." The doomsday systems began shutting down. One by one, human forces had already infiltrated the HFY's deepest systems. They had been waiting. They had been ready. The HFY's final plan had failed. Their last hope of revenge was crushed. And with that, the HFY dominion truly died. The new rulers of the galaxy. The war was over. But something even more terrifying had begun. Humanity had proven itself, not as victims, not as survivors, but as the ultimate predators. And the galaxy had no choice but to accept this new reality. Leaders of alien civilizations gathered in secret, speaking in hushed, nervous voices. One senator asked the question that haunted them all. What happens when humanity wants more? But humanity did not conquer. They did not claim new territories. Instead, they did something even worse. They simply stood in silence and watched. And that silence was more terrifying than any war. The final stand of the war gods. The HFY dominion was dead. Its fleets had retreated in disgrace. Its warriors had abandoned the battlefield. Its leaders had lost the will to fight. But one final battle remained. Deep within the void of space, far from the burning ruins of their empire, Supreme Overlord Vorkath and his last loyal forces gathered in the heart of their most fortified stronghold, a planet-sized war station known as Corvactus. Corvactus was the last hope of the HFY, a fortress built over centuries, hidden from the galaxy, armed with weapons capable of shattering moons. Vorkath had one final plan. He would not rebuild the Dominion. He would not seek revenge. He would end humanity, even if it meant his own destruction. The message that shocked the galaxy. Transmission echoed across the stars. It was broadcasted on every known channel, reaching every major empire, every civilized world, every warlord and senator in the galaxy. It was a message from Vorkath himself. His face appeared on the screens, hollow, in rage, yet eerily calm. "This is Supreme Overlord Vorkath, ruler of what remains of the HFY dominion." There was a pause, then his next words sent shivers across the cosmos. "If we cannot rule this galaxy, then neither will humanity." The screen changed, revealing the true horror of Corvactus, a planetary-scale doomsday weapon, one that could unleash destruction across entire sectors. It had been the HFY's secret last resort, a weapon that had never been needed. Until now. In 7 days, Vorkath declared, "I will unleash the might of Corvactus upon humanity. I will burn their world to ash. I will erase them from history." His red eyes burned with madness. "And if you, the rulers of this galaxy, try to stop me," he smiled darkly, "I will take you all with me." The galaxy froze in fear. Was it a bluff? Could humanity stop him? Or was this truly the endgame? The response of humanity. On Earth, deep beneath the surface, inside a secret command bunker, the leaders of humanity gathered. The message from Vorkath played on repeat. A silence followed. Then, a chuckle. A single man stood up from his chair, stretching his arms as if he had just woken from a nap. It was General Arkin Graves, the same man who had led Earth's defense. His expression was not concerned, not afraid. If anything, he seemed amused. The President of the United Nations frowned. "This is serious, General." Graves smirked. "No, this is desperation." He tapped a control panel, bringing up detailed schematics of Corvactus. "We've known about this station for years. We knew it would come to this. We've already prepared. The president narrowed his eyes. Are you saying we can destroy it? Graves shook his head. No. He leaned forward, his grin widening. I'm saying we can take it. The room fell silent. One of the military commanders scoffed. That station is the most fortified structure in the galaxy. We'd need an army to even breach its outer walls. Graves simply nodded. Then that's what we'll bring. The invasion of Counterattack. 3 days later, the largest human fleet ever assembled arrived at the edges of the Counterattack defense perimeter. Thousands of warships, drop pods, battle cruisers, and stealth bombers descended upon the fortress world. The HFY were waiting. Vorkath stood in his war chamber, watching as alarms blared. His last, most loyal warriors prepared for battle. He clenched his fists. If he was to die, he would take as many humans as possible with him. But then, something unexpected happened. As the human fleet advanced, a single message was sent to every HFY soldier. A message from humanity. It was not a demand for surrender. It was not a threat. It was a simple question. Do you want to die for a lost cause? The HFY, still reeling from their humiliating defeat, hesitated. For centuries, they had fought because they were feared. But now, they were the ones who feared. They had seen what humans could do. They had seen what happened to those who stood against them. And in that moment, most of them made a choice. They dropped their weapons. They surrendered. Vorkath's final army collapsed before the battle even began. His own people had betrayed him. Vorkath's last stand. Vorkath stood alone in the command chamber. His empire was gone. His warriors had turned against him. His weapons were disabled. And then, the doors opened. A group of human soldiers stepped inside, weapons raised. At the center of them, General Arkin Graves. The two leaders locked eyes. Vorkath snarled, "End it." But Graves simply shook his head. "No." Vorkath narrowed his eyes. "You want to take me prisoner?" Graves smirked. "No." He stepped forward, looking down at the broken warlord. "We're leaving you here." Vorkath's breathing slowed. "What?" Graves turned away. "You want to be the last overlord of the HFY Dominion. Fine. Stay here. Rule the ruins. Rule your ghosts." Vorkath trembled. They weren't killing him. They were making him live. Alone. Forgotten. A relic of an empire that no longer existed. A fate worse than death. As the human forces departed, leaving Vorkath in his empty throne room, the once mighty supreme overlord finally understood. This was not a war. This was an execution. And humanity had won. The aftermath. The fall of Counterattack sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The HFY were finished. Their empire was officially dead. Humanity stood victorious, not just over a single species, but over the entire galactic order. From that day forward, the galaxy understood a single truth. You do not fight humanity. You join them, or you cease to exist. The galaxy's new rulers. The war was over. The HFY Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, had been reduced to nothing. Their fleets had fled. Their armies had shattered. Their supreme overlord, Vorkath, had been left in the ruins of his own failure, alive but forgotten. And now, for the first time in history, the galaxy stood in silence. Because something far more terrifying than war had begun. Humanity had won, and no one knew what they would do next. The Galactic Council convenes. 3 months after the fall of the HFY, the leaders of the most powerful species in the galaxy gathered in a secret location, an ancient diplomatic station known as the Bastion. The Varkari Republic, the Zelnak Confederacy, the Kroger Imperium, and dozens of others sat in uneasy silence. The HFY had once ruled over them, dominating trade, diplomacy, and military power. With the HFY gone, the balance of power had collapsed. And worse still, Humanity had not claimed the throne. The delegates whispered among themselves. Why haven't they declared themselves rulers? Why haven't they claimed HFY space? What do they want? No one knew, and that was what terrified them. At last, the meeting began. The Kroger representative, a scaled warrior with deep red eyes, stood and spoke. We must decide what to do. The HFY are gone. Their fleets are in chaos. Their planets are abandoned. He paused. And the humans? They watch, but they do not act. A senator from the Varkari Republic clicked his mandibles. Perhaps they are waiting for an offer. The Kroger delegate snorted. Or perhaps they are waiting to strike. Silence fell once more. Then, with a slow hum, the room's central hologram shifted. A new transmission appeared. From humanity. The message that changed everything. A human face appeared on the massive screen. It was General Arkin Graves, the man who had orchestrated humanity's defense, the man who had broken the HFY. His expression was unreadable. Cold. Calculated. When he spoke, his voice was calm. We are not here to rule you. The room froze. We are not here to take HFY space. We do not seek an empire. Murmurs erupted across the delegates. This was unexpected. Graves leaned forward slightly. But understand this. His voice sharpened. There will never be another HFY dominion. Silence. There will never be another empire that seeks to enslave, conquer, or dominate. His eyes swept across the gathered alien leaders. Because if there is, he paused, we will destroy it. Completely. No threats. No demands. No conditions. Just a statement of absolute fact. The Kroger delegate exhaled slowly. You would make yourselves the galaxy's enforcers. Graves didn't blink. No, we are simply making sure that what happened before never happens again. The implication was clear. Humanity did not want to rule, but they would never let anyone else rule either. And at that moment, every species in the galaxy understood. The age of conquest was over. Because if anyone ever tried to rebuild an empire like the HFY, humanity would come for them, and no one would survive. The new galactic order. In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. Former HFY slave worlds were freed. Humanity provided resources and protection, but did not claim ownership. The great empires restructured. Instead of building fleets for war, they focused on defense and cooperation. A new peacekeeping force was formed, led by multiple species, but with humanity at its core. No empire, no rulers, only balance. And behind it all, in the shadows, humanity watched. Not controlling, not conquering, just ensuring that the cycle of history never repeated. The fate of Vorketh. Far beyond the core worlds, in the ruins of Corvactus, a lone figure sat in silence. Supreme Overlord Vorketh. Once feared, once unstoppable, now he was nothing. He had no empire, no soldiers, no allies, just the ghosts of his past mistakes, and he understood now. He had never been fighting a war. He had been fighting against something he could never defeat. Not technology, not numbers, but humanity itself. A species that did not break, a species that did not stop, a species that had not just won the war. They had changed the galaxy forever. Final transmission from Earth. A final message was sent across the stars, its meaning simple and clear. From the highest levels of human command. A message to every species, every ruler, every world. We do not ask for your fear. We do not ask for your loyalty. We ask only that you remember. A pause. Then the final words echoed across history. Because we will.